Started. Megan and I and Juanita are very excited. We've made it to prime time. We have never been at night before, and so usually we are having lots of fun and joking around in policy and having a good time, and this will be no different. So welcome everyone. Today is the 12th of January, and this is the Policy Committee. Our purpose is to work with administration and the team on reviewing policies, revising policies, proposing new policies to ensure the governance of the school district. And before we get started, I just want to introduce myself. I'm Anna Shurak, the committee members of this committee. Juanita is my co-chair, and then Curry and Jason are committee members. I also have my other esteemed board colleagues with us tonight. And I just want to quickly review the format for this meeting. Once a topic or a presentation is given by the administration, I will open up the questioning by asking if there are any questions from the board committee members or directors. And after that, in-person public comments will be taken pertaining to the topic being discussed, and then anyone that has joined the meeting via the webinar will have their comments read by a district representative. At the end of the meeting, if time allows, we'll hear community comments related to the work of the committee, but not specifically on the agenda today. I want to address, I said that differently at our last policy meeting, so just naming that we have restructured to create space for community members to offer thoughts on topics that may not be on the agenda if time allows. So please keep your comments to 5 minutes or less so everyone has a chance to speak within our limited time meeting. And if there are additional questions and our time is up, please send them to community comments. And thanks for your cooperation. Before we dive in, I know some board members are familiar and some community members might be familiar. The format of policy is pretty iterative in the moment, and it's very technical in terms of the rules of governance. So you'll oftentimes see us referring to our legal advisement to make sure we're following the right protocols to do first reads, adoption, review, and just to name that, it's a little bit different than some other committees, so we keep the work flowing and moving. And then also there are two different structures. There are actual policies that are adopted by the board and approved by the board, and then there are administrative regulations. We are very grateful to work in a district where we cooperatively review administrative regulations, but technically the board does not have to approve, nor does the administration technically have to get our approval on the administrative regulations. So just naming that, while you'll see us dig deeper into some and not into others, or sometimes the AR will give a lot of feedback and admin will take it back, but we won't always review it again. So just giving some context for how we operate here. We have continuously talked about getting shirts or other swag for policy, so we'll make that available to anyone that is interested, and you're gonna have to put up with Megan and I's corny jokes because we get really into this stuff. So Megan, handing it over to you.
Well, with that introduction, I don't know what more there is to say at this point. I'm Megan Schaefer. For those that may be joining new to us as evening consumers of public meetings, welcome, and I'm happy to navigate this process with everyone. And as Ms. Shurak said, I don't know if we're going to be that formal now, but I'm going to try with that, start with that. It is a really opportunity to dialogue, share information so that the board, the committee is best positioned to recommend policy, to move forward with policy as we try to make sure it connects to how students, staff, and families experience it at the end of the day. I'd like to introduce Ed Diazio, also new to policy committee here from Whistler Pearlstein. He's stepping in for Ken Roos, who supported our Friday morning meetings, and because of the change, I'm glad to have Ed by my side to support this work, as well as Anna mentioned, it is technical, and we want to make sure that what we put out in terms of our rules, local rules and procedures that they are legally compliant as a baseline or starting point. I'll do some introductions, and I'd also probably ask Ed to jump in. In terms of where we are in policy world right now, we are taking a look back or starting over our review of our policy series. And if you are familiar with where our policies are located on the website, they're in numbered series. So we're back at the zeros. It's like a weird way to frame it, but that set or series of policies really relate to board governance, how you govern as committees, how you govern as a full body, and details some local rules that you have agreed to follow. And so for the most part, we're not recommending, haven't recommended large-scale adjustments to anything because they are legally compliant. There are some tweaks that we'll talk about that were added for consideration in terms of some new or changes in sort of meeting structures that you wanted to look at. So we made those adjustments. But again, these are the rules that govern your work. And so as administration, we want to make sure that we're supporting that by offering, these adjustments that are designed to meet what you want to do. So, for example, the board policy and procedure 002, and for technically speaking, they're not administrative regulations here, they're board local procedures. So there were some revisions that we looked at related to the appointment of a temporary president that happens once a year or when there's re-election. So that's not something that happens very often, but it's helpful to memorialize it so you don't have to go through and say who's going to be the temporary president. It's just already established in that. And we talked about this revision the last time, which is why it's proposed for adoption. And the list of committees was also updated and that's reflected on page 7 of your packet. So again, those were minor adjustments from our standpoint. Sometimes we're writing an entire policy. We just went in and made those adjustments. And that was with sort of support because they would normally be advising the board on those procedural portions.
Are there any questions on policy 002 from the board? Okay. Amy, anyone online? Okay. Great. So we'll move that one forward.
The next one is policies 4, which is the formulation and adoption of policies. The discussion item or the change in discussion that we had the last time related to where we can make non-substantive changes that don't require board action or board approval. It just allows us to go in and do some routine cleanup, so if a title has changed, a policy number has changed, a cross-reference needs to change, it just allows us to be a little more dynamic and efficient in making those changes in real time that ideally help the end consumer, our staff, community, families that are trying to access policy, and if that cross-reference is wrong, we don't want to have to wait to come back to policy to fix it. So those are the things. And historically speaking, I think when we've made gone in and done revisions, hey, we cleaned up all the cross-references, we announce that to you at the next meeting so that you know that that's happened. We aim to be as transparent as possible, even if it is a minor change. So that is just what it was, for the most part, addressed in that update.
Any questions or comments?
I think the only one that gives me pause is just a limiting of redundant language. I think that can be extremely subjective, where somebody thinks it's clarifying a point to get the overarching vision of the policy across. Somebody else can feel like it's redundant, coming from a redundant person, so I apologize for recognizing that. That's the only one that gives me a little bit of caution. I think it's important that if the committee does have the red line and can look through those, then I'm fine with it. But it would also be you know, this is sub 0.5. We cut this because it was sub 0.5. So then you're also telling me it's not a grammar reason or it's not a procedural reason. It's a redundancy reason too. Does that make sense?
I think just from my own standpoint, we would err on the side of caution to say, like, if we're not sure if it's substantive or not, we should just bring it to your attention and say, this is what we're changing. And especially, I agree, that's probably where you'd have more of the debate as to whether it's substantive or not.
Thanks.
I just have a question about how something like a non-substantive change would be shared out. If it wasn't done in a meeting, how would that be communicated out?
I can tell you this isn't like a frequent practice. I think what happens is we find that, oh, we're looking at a policy because someone has called our attention to it and it has a title or a name of someone that doesn't even work in the district anymore, and we're like, oh, we should change that just because there's so much policy to cover. We've really tried to eliminate names that used to be a feature, so I think those are all out, but a title that may be updated. So sometimes it's just brought to our attention and then communicated with those that need to know about that. It would also be republished in the you know, as a policy with the updated information. But if it's just a grammar or like a period or something we've missed, like we've never made like an announcement about that. But if there's a desire for a more comprehensive approach to that, I'm certainly open to see what would be manageable. And again, it's not, look, I'm the first to, I wouldn't want to like change something that felt like I wouldn't want that, you know, name to be changed because that means something totally different. That would be something I would want to have the board be aware of. But I'm happy to say, like, when we go through, like, in the summertime and say, like, oh, we made all of these cross-references updated, we could share that in a board update, and then in the first meeting in the fall, say, the things that we did over the summer are summarized as follows. That's easy to do. If that's what if the policy committee would like us to do that, we certainly could do that. Yeah.
I mean, my perspective would be that there's enough other catch-alls that if like you did something nefarious, we could quickly, which I don't think you would, Megan, like, we could quickly stop it and not use the policy. It's more like housekeeping. Or another example that comes to mind that came up over the last few years was when we changed the grade bands. Kindergarten was never mentioned, so we had to go back through and add kindergarten, which was kind of a waste of time to do in the committee meeting. So my offering would be I don't think you need to report back on it and just stick to these things. And Corey, if you'd feel more comfortable taking out the elimination of redundant language and moving it forward, if anyone else.
Oh, can I jump in? Because I think I just have the answer, because Ed was going to give me the grace of allowing me to correct myself. But I will want to give him credit because the policy actually does indicate that we will report it out in the board committee. Chair will report it out. There's language at the bottom of the first, which is page 8. So like I said, there's not been times when we've changed policy that we aren't already looking at it. So what we will commit to do is making sure that if we are engaging in any of this, and I think it addresses then Curry's question of like, here are the changes that we made, it's being reported out in the next meeting. We're not in the business of doing a lot of revisions absent a formal meeting anyway.
Yeah, I mean, and also you could do it in a consent agenda in that meeting. So we have made substantive changes to this 504, whatever it is, that policy, it's in, and somebody, if they felt uncomfortable, that was on the committee, could pull it from there. So I think there's a way that we can put it into the process where it has some eyes on it, but it won't slow down the work. And yeah, I'd like to strike that one if you're comfortable with that, just because I feel like it's too subjective.
Juanita and Jason, are you okay with striking elimination?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm fine either way. I mean, I would defer if this is what's been going on for the last couple of years. I mean, I'm fine with keeping it. I think that, as you mentioned, the safeguards are there where you have to publicly notify it. So I'm fine either way.
Okay. Okay, so why don't we, because of the concern and that we're all okay either way, why don't we go ahead and strike the elimination bullet and otherwise can move it forward? Megan, Ed, is that's permissible, or we have to?
This has gone through one reading.
This is proposed for
This
adoption,
is just
yeah.
procedures.
Yeah, that's fine then.
Okay.
I can move, yeah.
Okay. All right. Good old 007, Megan.
And I apologize, I just realized, because I am playing double duty
Okay.
tonight, that I
Okay.
didn't project what we were talking about, but this is the language on page 9 of the packet, that .5. So I'll catch up now. The 007.
We talk about 007
We
so
have,
much.
which is why for some of the policies we are going through the series, we have, last we reviewed this was in 2024, which doesn't seem like that long ago, and we had an opportunity to make revisions at that time. This particular adjustment that was is being proposed for or we've discussed is adding the additional public participation. And so this is, I'm sorry, on page 11, the agenda for board meetings to address the separation between the public participation that occurs before the vote, which would be on for action items only, and then adding an additional public participation opportunity at the end of the, following the board taking action on the business that's in front of them to allow for any other matters which are or may be before the board. This actually used to be the structure a while ago, and so for me it's like, okay, we've seen this here before, and for those in the viewing audience that might remember that, this is going back to that type of format. So this is just reflecting that update.
Any questions from the board or the committee? And then the board.
I had a quick question, sorry, that I didn't bring it up, I guess, the first reading, so apologize, but quick question, is there a place where it's like a new business item where a board member during the meeting can bring up a new item to be discussed?
There's a practice for it. Do you want to review the practice for it, Mike?
Sorry.
There's a board practice and a policy for how to do that if the agenda isn't on the board agenda and isn't put on, the only two people that can put things on the board agenda are the superintendent or the president of the board. If that, and you're gonna jump in and correct me if I get this wrong. The other way that board members, they would have to, at the end of the meeting, propose to add the agenda item. They would have to have 5 votes to move it forward. And that agenda item would probably more than likely go to a future meeting unless there's urgency around it. So that already exists in practice and policy.
Let me put myself back on. Yeah, perfect, thank you.
Any other questions from the board or committee? Anything online? Okay. Okay, so we're okay with moving that forward, Jason, Juanita?
Yes,
correct?
thank you.
Yeah, okay, great. All right, Megan. First readings, dun, dun, dun.
Okay.
I'm really trying here, friends, I'm really trying.
All right. Okay, so the other item that's under board purview, all of this is obviously, but is the civility policy. That's where we are, correct? Yeah, okay. So that's policy 6. We did bring this forward at the last meeting. The administration, neither administration or legal counsel is proposing revisions at this time, but there was interest in bringing this back for discussion so that we can discuss. This has been in place since, I was going to say, it's been in place for a while. It was here before I started, which is 2011. It's, I think, just from the staff perspective and administrative perspective, it's a helpful policy to have in place. It's a little unique in terms of it's not, I think, everywhere, but it certainly is helpful for kind of setting some ground rules. If nothing else is available, we have a civility policy to look at. So that's where we are from an administrative perspective.
Are there comments from the committee members? You have something you want me to jump in?
Do you want to jump in first?
Sure. I was just wondering, Megan, in paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, in paragraph 6, if we could just add community members as well. The top sections talk about community members, district employees, anyone being held to the civility standards, but then when it talks about specific next steps, it's not mentioned community members, so just to be crystal clear. And then the only other thing, I don't know if it needs to be in the policy or if we wanted to have an AR, just how it will be addressed. So I could imagine a situation that someone feels that there was a civility challenge in a public board meeting. It is not, at least my expectation, that Dr. Ranelli would address it in the immediate and like go through these things, but even just adding would be addressed within a time frame or build out the AR for what the process might be in order to file a complaint could be helpful.
Yes, and the related procedures do articulate
that?
a complaint procedure, which is not here, but I can pull it up so we can look at it together, but it is,
Okay.
it is articulated in the procedure as well.
Okay, I just wouldn't want the expectation from people to be that Dr. Ranelli's on the spot or anyone is if there's a challenge. Curry, did you have others?
There has been 2 different community members over the course of this year that has brought this civility policy to the table and asked for it to be revised because it does not address community members to community members within the audience and at the podium. And there's been at least 2 incidents where people at the podium have had uncivil behavior towards them. So let's be real transparent and honest. What we're talking about is what we've seen over the course of the last year. And across the state, other districts are looking at how to change their civility policy to look at the whole community, meaning us, students, everybody involved. But there's a balance here with the First Amendment, and it can be very opinionated what somebody thinks is uncivil to what somebody else thinks is civil. So like that's where I get a little unclear about how do you write that, and what's really we have the state law that says there is direct action that the school can take if somebody puts people in danger, all those pieces. But I guess that statement is, when people have brought this to our attention, they have said our civility policy isn't strong enough. But at the same time, are we really seeing high quality ones that are being tested across the state?
I think one of the things you have to keep in mind is that practically speaking, how you enforce a civility policy at a board meeting is different than how you would be able to enforce a civility policy for activities that occur in a school. So if a parent shows up to a parent-teacher conference and acts in a rude or obnoxious way, for example, in the opinion of one person, right? It is easier for the school district to regulate that conduct than many situations that we could probably think through here that play out in a public board meeting, right? Because this is a time and a place that the public can come to petition their government, and it doesn't necessarily always have to be civil, right? Folks who come and want to criticize or tell you that you're not doing things the way they would do it, right? There's no legal requirement that they be nice to you. So how you can enforce the policy, you can still have a civility policy at a board meeting because the First Amendment does have some limitations to it. But I think we all just have to understand that there's a different ability to enforce it in a public meeting and a public setting than in a school building, for example.
Exactly. I think that's a really good point. But I do think, to Anna's point earlier, that we should address all of the opportunities. It's hard, that's the one problem I have with this, the bifurcation in my brain happens, like what happens in a school? What's the behavior? Feels very different than what is allowed at a board meeting, which feels like, thank you for articulating that so well, much, much broader. But we do want people to feel comfortable sharing and expressing their points of view. Again, it's different between the podium and the board. We're representatives of the government. That is a different level. Between community member and community member within the room is different. And so I'm not talking about podium to board. That's the First Amendment. That's pretty broad. There's a lot you can say. I'm talking within the room. And again, I don't think, and I'll just be really honest about this, I don't think there's a lot we can enforce. But I do think that it puts a value on what we respect as healthy civil dialogue and respect for peer community members, students and teachers. And I think that is more the reason why I believe it's important.
I wonder if there's actually an opportunity to articulate that, Curry. Like, in this first paragraph, similar to what the distinction you made of like how we are able to uphold civility, and it in number 4 articulate staff handbooks, student handbooks. It would be like professional practices with the expectation of the community. It is noted that as a district, we are not, sort of giving ourselves a little bit of grace in that too, because the expectation can't also be that if it gets in a back and forth, or even if I'm offended by something that someone says, it doesn't really matter to some degree. I might think it's uncivil, but to your point, it's not a violation. To just give us a little bit of, not cover isn't the right word I'm looking for, but some sort of articulation of the limits of it.
I think in the third paragraph here, there's a sentence in the middle that says, the district does not intend this policy to deprive any person of their right to appropriate self-expression. Rather, it seeks to maintain, to the extent possible, an environment in which people can feel safe and secure. We might be able to add language that acknowledges that times and places where people do come to express themselves frequently happens at a board meeting, and the expectation is that community members and everyone in the room respects the self-expression of others, even if it's not a viewpoint that you share or something like that. I think we can add a sentence or two maybe to that third paragraph.
Yeah, I think that sounds great.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll take a shot at putting something together and get it to Anna and the chair and the committee.
Juanita?
I just want to mention a particular concern for me would be when students are at the podium and any disruptions to them while they're speaking. I think we need to have a certain particular type of language and expectation, because students have voiced their concerns about feeling safe in those moments.
So we'll take a look at that. My only concern or pushback would be there's so many scenarios where we can't be very specific in here. That might just be known for me to just stop, right? Or whoever's sitting in the seat to just stop that discussion right there. So again, we'll look at that, but my concern is to start putting specific things in here. There's so many different scenarios at a board meeting, we wouldn't be able to get in here. So we'll look at it and give it a shot.
And one quick thing, this second, I know you're going to look at it, Dr. Rinelli, this second paragraph aligned to the strategic plan, potentially just cut that whole thing out since it's old work and a lot of words. Redundancy.
Efficiency.
Yeah, or whatever that,
2026.
no, your one from the last time, eliminate redundant.
Eliminate,
Yeah.
We're doing it the right way.
Yeah. And committee members, does anyone have anything else?
The only thing I would reference is, one, the state law has some pretty strong, like, clear language on this that I feel like threads that needle really nicely around respectful civil dialogue. And two, Dr. Rinelli, we should parse out that just a little, because there are a few state cases that have come back this year, and the court sided with the public. So it's a hard one.
Rest of board, or you had something?
No,
Okay.
I was making sure it was off.
Other board members, do you have any comments or questions? No, okay. Anything online, Amy?
Not specific to this.
Okay. Okay, so look forward to talking about this one again.
It'll be our new 007.
Yes. Oh, policy jokes. Okay, so now we're going to AR 1511R.
Yes, so this, again, is administrative regulation that we're proposing a change to. You, as a board, do not need to approve formally, but we certainly want you to be aware of it and ask any questions or ways that we might be able to clarify this. But as is not uncommon, there's a change in practice or procedure of a governing body that we report to for the purposes of interscholastic sports. That is the PIAA, Pennsylvania Interscholastic Athletic Association. They recently changed their guidance to allow for students enrolled in private schools, including faith-based private schools, to be able to participate in PIAA-sponsored sports if their school does not have that sport, and if they otherwise meet the eligibility criteria for the district in which they reside. So this would be our students within our district boundaries that are now currently attending a private school. That private school doesn't offer the sport that they want to play. They're asking to play a sport here. So while this is sort of an expansion of what was previously in place related to charter school students, we are aware we haven't had, if any, students that have participated that way for a variety of reasons, but we think there's going to be a little more interest in this particular one. So we wanted to make sure that we updated the regulation, and also because of the sort of operational logistics of making sure students are both eligible, that we can make sure that they maintain eligibility, because there are standards associated to like attendance and grades and things like that, not to mention the tryout portion and et cetera, that we start that process by making it clear that that's a new thing that we're allowing for in accordance with the PIAA, and are able to then get messaging out that to our community members who inquire about that opportunity and what that looks like for us operationally speaking. So this is like the first step. This just happened in December with like not much fanfare. And so we became aware of it and are now working to implement that change.
Is the language here pulled directly from the reg that's added? I know it's a nuance, but this one on in accordance with PIAA guidance, the second paragraph from the bottom.
This is likely not the exact language
Okay.
that comes from the PIAA bylaws, but it tracks with other paragraphs in the AR for other groups of students.
Okay.
But the
Yeah.
eligibility in terms of what students are eligible for just tracks the minimum of what the PIAA regulations require.
Got
We're
it.
not giving away any additional entitlements through the AR beyond what the PIAA requires.
Got it. The line that stood out to me in there, was there assigned district school if their own school? Because we have some sports that are at some like some at Harriton, not at Lower Merion. So if you went to a private school, but were assigned to Lower Merion, they might not have the sport, but Harriton does. Do those kids have the right to go to Harriton?
I suspect that probably both of the high schools have the same PIAA sports.
Do they?
Yep, to my knowledge, yeah, I can't think of one. You maybe start thinking, but I
Yeah.
can't think of any PIAA sports where there's a difference
not
between the
good.
schools.
There may certainly be times when like a club or a non-PIAA sport might run
Yeah.
at one school, but I would be surprised if you didn't have the PIAA sports at both.
And then are we saying that it would be for extracurriculars or just PIAA?
Just PIAA.
Interesting. Hold on, any other committee members? And then,
I have a million questions.
I see you, Sarah. Go ahead, Jessica. Yeah. lines of
Oh,
yours,
so-
just to clarify.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Just as far as that assigned district school, for a private school student that lives in our choice zone high school area, would it be that they could try out and be on the team for either of the high schools? Or would we say, like, this is the high school that you are trying out for?
I think in practical terms, we would say what would your choice have been? And then you don't get to get cut from that school and then say, oh, I think I'd actually be a Lower Merion student. So I think
Okay.
that we, just in terms of fairness and process, that's what we would do.
I was just curious, when it says guidance, so is this a requirement by PIAA? It is.
Yeah, it should say PIAA regulations.
Okay, so we're going to change. Perfect. And then how many, do we have any idea as to how many people this will expand? Not expand, but how many people we anticipate will take advantage of this?
We're not anticipating like a wave of private school students, because if you think about a lot of private schools around here, they have their complement of athletic teams. But I do think there'll be a few, there's transitions happening. We know of a few that are interested. So like if there were, I mean, if there were 10, I would be shocked.
I was just curious.
That's where I am right now, but I might be shocked.
The only the data point that I can share, annually, we get 1 to 2 families that inquire about it before the PIAA.
Got it. I was just curious as to, like, if they went to a private school and maybe couldn't compete at that level at that private school, maybe then they came.
Can't do that.
Yeah,
So
they
if
wouldn't be
try out
eligible.
there.
Right.
Have that
Only
sport.
if they.
Oh, okay, so it'd have to be, got it. And then for those individuals, you said that we will have to oversee and make sure that they meet the other regulations. Will that increase staff-wise? Will we have to, or is that something that we could, another responsibility that could be handed to a, meaning are we gonna have to hire someone else to handle
Unless I'm
that?
shocked, no,
Okay.
right? And, I mean, I think that's the variable. If we have an influx that we're not anticipating, there might be some additional management that comes along with that. But in reality, the access that we need is a burden that's almost the private school and the parents' burden to make sure we receive the information so we can guarantee their eligibility. So we just need to start a workflow that works, efficiently.
And then the last thing, sorry, was that on that end, or on that note, is there any way to put something in that it would, I guess we can't put that requirement on, like if we have to get information from the school, right? We're relying on the school. Is there any way that we can add some language that it's on the parent or someone to provide us with that information so that you guys aren't, that the administration, our administration isn't chasing after it, but that it's on the onus of the student to, or the family to get it to us?
We do have some more detailed guidance that kind of explains that, because otherwise we're not going to have the access, but I don't mind looking here to see if there's more. We were trying to track the language that was already there, but I think it's probably helpful to just make sure we're as transparent as possible about what those relative burdens look like.
Thank you.
Did you want to?
So do we have to provide busing for this?
No.
No, we do not have to provide busing. So everything is basically on the school or the parent to be able, even for schools that we provide busing for the daytime.
Correct.
Fascinating. Sorry, that's fascinating to me. So we have to provide busing for the kid to go to the school and come home from the school, but not to the sports.
We're not obligated to bus between the two schools.
Got it, okay.
And with respect to, most of the times, the coaches and the athletic directors want their team to travel together. So one of the expectations will be that if you are coming from a private school, that you come here and you leave from the district, and you don't drive from your private school to the away competition, right?
Yeah.
Because part of the program is what you do on the bus and
Yeah.
the
Which
team
I feel like
building
we
and things
have
like
with a
that.
lot of our sports here. The kids can't just get dropped off. They have to go on the
Correct.
bus there. Yep, okay. I'm gonna pause for a
On,
moment.
on that note, sorry, just what about on the way home? So when they come back from a competition, they're at the school, I would assume,
They bring back to the school.
from the school to their home on a late bus.
No, they come to us.
They come back.
Yeah, we, like, anyone, like, the team comes back to the school, and from there, like, if they're at a competition, then they're, like,
The parents will pick
family,
it up.
exactly,
Got it.
parents or
Okay.
guardians pick them up.
To piggyback off of Carrie real quick, so we know we're not responsible for buses. Is there any expenditures that PIAA is expecting the district to absorb? Like when we think about our kids, a student athlete, there is expenditures that we do. Are we held accountable as a district to provide additional stuff for these students coming from the private schools? And I know we're not expecting a lot, but is that on us as a district?
So if they make the team, they would have all of the benefits of, you know, like a uniform, coaching, things like that. We aren't able to charge them separately for a fee to participate, unless we were doing that for our own students, district students.
The way I look at it, and we could categorize it, yes, so whatever an athlete would be afforded from Lower Merion School District, a private school student would be afforded that. Concussion testing, things like that. Also, anything, the way we're interpreting it, correct me if I'm wrong, anything having to do with the sport, our people would be in charge. Anything outside of the sport, like a late bus home with the general population, we wouldn't be required to provide. Does that make sense? Because there are other kids on the bus, there's, you know, other rules that we follow as a school district that isn't pertaining specifically to a sport. So if you can categorize it like that, everything having to do with that sport, yes. Anything, any process that we have for our athletes outside the sport without the coach, no.
I have a question.
I don't know about that.
So how do we account for that? How do we prepare just in case it's, you know, more than you think?
Well, we didn't get much of a runway to this, quite frankly. And I think, though I'm with the athletic directors, the principals at each school, we've gotten together, talked through like what that would look like. We've already drafted procedures that include a notification to families, that include a notification to the private school about the expectations relative to what records we're going to need, how we're going to navigate that. I think the complexities of even the transport is going to be another, you know, kind of hurdle. I also think like, you know, the whole trial process is going to be something that we need to make sure that people have advance notice of, so that if there is that opportunity available, that they're, you know, we have given them enough notice to say we're interested in doing that. So it's ongoing, but I feel that we're on top of it as much as we can be at this point. And we will certainly come back if there are, you know, like, again, if we're shocked, we're going to probably have to make some other adjustments to that. But I think we're doing what we can with the information that we have in front of us.
The way I look at it is the construct of and the structure of our athletics are set, right? So we have a certain number of kids on our baseball team. These kids would try out like everyone else, right? So it wouldn't be, okay, well, we need 25 more uniforms because 25 more kids want to play baseball.
Okay.
You know, again, the structure wouldn't change, but that would be it.
I'm sorry, this is probably in there, but is it all grades?
Yeah, it's 7 to 12.
Okay, so track's not PIAA?
Not before 7th grade.
Okay, because I was going to say that's pretty wide open. Okay, got it.
I just have a quick question. You mentioned that there's some interest. Can you share what sports that interest has been in?
I'm trying to think. I think there was an interest in basketball.
I think maybe middle school girls basketball
Yeah,
was
I
the
think
one
they were
request
both
we had
basketball.
gotten. And they're not at that 8th grade yet, they're asking for the future.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, anything about this? Okay, all right, thanks for bringing us into the AR.
So we'll probably make that minor adjustment, come back and talk to you about what we did the next time.
Great,
We're
thank
sort of
you.
on the hook for complying with it at this
Yeah.
point, because it's in.
Thank you.
All right, the next two items for discussion are just that, for discussion. One is acknowledgement of, you heard earlier this evening, so one pro to having these together on the same night as we get information. Well, did I say just one? I meant like among the many pros of doing this together is, you heard earlier tonight about the personal finance course, and there's a connection to policy 217, which is high school graduation requirements. We didn't want to propose language tonight just because we wanted to get, here's the context, and so what you're likely to see in February is just an update to that particular policy to address this new criteria. So if there are any questions or comments now that you have context related to that, certainly can ask tonight, or just hold your questions till we bring it back with the revised language.
Okay. I don't have any questions. I guess the offering would just be if there's any other changes that Dr. Ranelli in his tenure and being newer wants to propose for high school graduation requirements. Could we bring those at the same time to discuss? Yep. Other committee members? No. Okay. Board members? Okay. Thank you. Amy? Okay, great. Okay, thanks. Megan?
Okay, and finally, what's more formally on the agenda for discussion is the proposed new policy, commercial advertising. We've talked about this and as a discussion item for over the course of a few policy meetings. The idea is to open up the conversation about the potential for commercial advertising in exchange for some, contribution or donation or something. Typically what you might think about is a banner that's on on a fence adjacent to a playing field, something like that. And so having some guidance around how we do that, why we do it, when we do it, is helpful. And the last time we were together, there was a desire to see what some more details would look like in terms of our regulation, which is what you'll see on page 29 that was proposed by Whistler. Again, just I think it was the idea of like, let's talk more about this, let's explore this more without making a commitment one way or the other. So that's the discussion item.
Just coming from a district who participated in some of this, there's just some caveats and some really big pitfalls that we'd have to rely on Whistler to avoid. And I know that some of them are written in this sample, things like that, but could be advantageous, but could also jam us up for a lot of reasons. So just be really, really careful with the opinion of, oh, this is great, this is a good way for us to raise money. There's just some limitations. I'd also talk to Ed and Whistler about other districts that they represent that support this, and see what their experiences have been in Pennsylvania, because I have the New Jersey reference.
And to that point, I'd like to understand what is the win? If they know, like if they can articulate not just how do we do this and what are some of the pitfalls, what's the ROI there too? Because when somebody says, oh, you can do it, you can get around it this way, and then you wind up having $10,000, is it worth it? So understanding the revenue gain from it would be really helpful, or the impact of it. My first reaction to this, and having dealing with sponsorships and development and fundraising my entire career, that this is way too light. Like, this is nowhere near the levels of intricacy that you would have to go through to do anything around a naming, sponsorship, or development, which is what this kind of sounds like. So it is pretty extensive, and I think for a district the the level of no ways, like, no way we're gonna do that, no way we're gonna, like, these are all the exceptions that we wouldn't even consider would be really high. It's a lot of work, is what I'm saying, sorry.
Right, and again, you talk about the return on investment, whether it be a banner or things like that, people get creative, right, when they want this. It would be donating a scoreboard into a gym, things like that, things that are valuable that could be there for a while. So again, really careful. If you're interested, we'd have a lot of work to do.
And you have current board policy 704 on naming rights and commemoration activities and things like that. This policy would be more traditional advertising as we think of it, advertising signs around the outfield of a baseball field, right? Not we're going to rename this wing of the building after this person.
Yes, and if my memory serves me right, this came up associated with events here in connection when we were talking about renting our spaces and signage around the site, around rental spaces. And then we kind of parlayed that conversation into, kind of stretched it a little bit more. And I think this is how it got from A to B to Z. So yeah, these policies are all jigsawed together. But I think it was around that initial, how do we charge for their space? And then what if they want to, put a banner up and the banner stays for a month? That's, I believe, how we kind of escalated this a while ago.
My offering would be to take it off the table for right now. Honestly, we already have 704 in place. There's enough other things administration is taking on. It's not a huge ROI, and we already reviewed policy last year around the NIL contributions and other things for specific student situations, revenue generating connected to the district. So that would be my recommendation in terms of other priorities, but I don't know how my colleagues feel about that. Curry, Juanita, Jason.
I was just going to say, before we went down the road of spending the money from a legal standpoint, I would like to know the answers to those questions about, the return on investment, if any, from talking with other schools that are doing, if we're going to go down that road. I would like to know that information before we hire the law firm if it is as tedious and it's going to be as labor intensive as Curry was saying. I'd like to know that information before we undergo the cost associated with that. Right, to determine if it's worth it to even go. And then I think going back to the 704 that you had mentioned, it might be helpful, not from a legal perspective, but from like an administration standpoint, like, do we see, or from talking to other schools, is there a need to have this additional policy? Or is everything going to come down the line of the 704 and we're fine with that potentially, that type of information?
What came up before was we started to review other revenue generating things and different inquiries about using our spaces and the offers for money, and that under 704 this type of thing isn't articulated. So to move that forward, we would have to have another policy in place, not to move forward charging people for our spaces, but to move forward having other commercial advertising or monies donated.
Right, I would just like to kind of split it, so with 704, if we can get X amount of money with that, and the return on investment on like adding a 706 is minute, then obviously I wouldn't think that there would be a need to move forward with that. But so I think just if we could break down, if we are going to at least look into whether or not this is worthwhile to move forward in the sense of from a financial standpoint, I would like to know from a commercial standpoint versus a naming rights standpoint what the possible revenue could be from what other schools have been successful with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm thinking back to 704. We don't have like tiers of money for naming rights in 704. It was more like donation, like
Types.
process and types for what happens. I don't think it's actual dollars that you would see in 704. This is the only revenue generating one.
Yeah, there's 702, which is gifts,
Yes.
grants, and donations as well. So there's you could give a gift and not get a naming right, you could do a naming right without giving a gift. It's, and then this would be separate, which I think everyone has like laid out what we're looking at here as another opportunity. And the way it came up was basically, here's the scope of ways in which we could potentially look at revenue opportunities. I don't, and it looks like Dr. Mel wanted to jump in, but that I just want to confirm that other policy that exists as well.
So before, I know this is on the bottom for discussion, before our next meeting, I will do some research on what districts do this and what kind of return on investment they have, which will answer a lot of your questions, whether we should move forward or not.
Thank you.
Do you want anyone spending time?
Get more relevant.
All right. I'm going with the majority. I don't think it's worth the time for the ROI that it'll even take him, but I'm in the minority here.
I would just lightly dipstick test this and
Yeah,
just like
it's not
look,
gonna
yeah, great. And we're at light level, hey, oh my God, they made $10 million on this. Maybe we'll change our tune up here.
So I'll use a couple of superintendent gatherings and meetings that I have set up between the month and take care of it that way instead of putting out surveys and things like that.
Juanita, did you have any thought?
Ditto.
Okay.
Sorry, just one other thing. Have we, Sorry, one last thing is that, has anyone expressed any interest in this, or this is more of a proactive, like has?
He's saying yes.
So I'm curious, because I think that's the other piece of it too, is that, we could talk to other districts and they might have a different, like, they might have had a lot more exposure or not. Are we allowed to share broad strokes of that? Or can you at least have that conversation with Dr. Ranelli at some point so that we can incorporate that in? Because I think that would be helpful to know from our district if there has been some sort of an interest and to what extent. A stronger or a weaker draw, depending on it. Thank you.
And just to kind of echo Dr. Ranelli earlier, and in agreement, but I'm not on the committee with Anna, is we also have to think as a board the liability and risks that come with it. There might be a competition. I'm a painter. I only want my sign up. But also what that company is associated with, what they stand for. There's a lot of due diligence and legal issues that do come with this too. Is that even worth it as a district as well, that we need to think about? Does that company tie in with our core values and a mission as a district? There's a lot of risks that come with this, and I have to echo what Dr. Ranelli said, and in agreement with Anna.
Yep. Again, that was my part of this was the sponsorships, because just look at the amount the Met had to give back in the last 5 years. So let's just see if there's any money.
I appreciate the fastidiousness of our finance chair. It's really digging in for us to find more dollars, so we'll work together.
I think from a legal standpoint, from a risk standpoint, I'm very risk adverse. I just think it would be helpful to know from a financial standpoint whether or not this is even an option before we even get to the hurdle of, insulating the district and making sure that we have the policy and procedures in place to make sure that we don't run the issues of what everyone has discussed, right? We don't even get to that point if from a financial standpoint, it isn't even, there's no return on investment.
Absolutely. Thank you. Any comments on this one?
Yes, Talia Nissim of Ardmore, we have such a large budget. Why would we spend all of this time on dealing with this seemingly problematic policy and not spend the time fixing the budget so we don't need to go down this road? Also, how do we pick through the advertisers and if they are appropriate?
Thank you. Any other comments? No. Okay.
All right, that was a great discussion.
Yeah.
Just want to note that for the record. And we're at the point in the agenda where we talk about future discussion items. And like I said, we'd like to forecast what's coming largely with policy. It's not a gotcha usually thing, except for if the PIAA makes a change just in the middle of the year randomly. So what would be next for us would be probably beginning to peek into the 100 series of the policies. So we would probably take a chunk of those, and largely, some of them will be for review, especially if we've recently reviewed them. Some of them you won't even appear because we just looked at them. But we will be digging into that, as well as some other updates on technology items that we've had on future discussion, and we'll probably bring those back in February and March as well. So that's.
Megan, for AI, when are you thinking of AI?
I think and I believe I'm recalling the conversations that we've had over the last few months about readiness for next year. So to the extent we want to put in a little more, some more parameters around the work in terms of an AR, we may begin building that out so we have some language to work with as we go into the next year. I always think about what opportunities present themselves in the summer, what do we want to arm our staff with for the new year in terms of AI, but I think that's a potential we bring back for that purpose.
Yeah, I think the work that we do with Scott and his team and Megan and Whistler, I think it's important that it's an ongoing discussion. When we started this meeting to right now, AI has changed 3 times. Mm-hmm. So it's really interesting to be able to, and every district's in the same boat, to be able to write these ARs to where they're fluid enough to capture everything where we're not changing them every 5 seconds. So between now and before the end of the year, absolutely, we'd like to get something where you could approve, or you could have an AR you could actually see and grab onto and talk about.
Yeah, that's where I was going. I was actually wondering if we need to relook at the policy in tandem with it and clarify and ensure that there's like strict governance procedures around AI, and then even bifurcate potentially around educational approach, like how our teachers, and then what we are allowing staff and how they are using AI and delineating those. So I was just going to offer maybe like give more time if needed versus rushing, because none of us, no offense if anyone is, I'm not aware that anyone is an AI expert, but give ourselves time to talk to the other districts or some leading experts in the community or universities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an exciting topic. I credit, Scott and Frank for keeping it at the forefront with our conversations with leaders. And I think, we probably could have AI just figure this all out for us by the end of the year. But I did want to say that usually, someone could just say, sadly, right?
Something just did online.
Yeah. Sadly. It wouldn't be as fun until next year. But typically when we bring forward an administrative regulation, usually there's something in policy we need to adjust because of that proposal. And it's just, I think, helpful to have both of them in front of you when we're proposing language. So I imagine we bring both back, the policy with an administrative regulation for you to look at.
Great, and the only last thing I would say, because you named it and then I see your hand, Jason, is I know you mentioned thinking Scott and Megan and Frank about next year, so we're kind of getting in that jam. So if there are other specific policies in addition to the 100 series that you'd want us to look at in advance so you can do what you need to in the summer, put those on there. Jason, I saw you going to Mike.
I would also love to see if there's a way to have a future discussion about the off and away. I know we had talked about that. So if that's a possibility of maybe discussing the implementation of how it's implemented, and then get some advice from the administration as to, whether or not you think it's working appropriately and how you would change it, if any, based on the landscape.
Off and away isn't a policy though.
Correct, I believe it's a directive from the board that was supposed to be implemented, or not supposed to be, but is implemented by the administration.
Right, but I don't know if it falls in policy committee or curriculum committee, because it's not actually a policy. Off and away is not. So however you would recommend we handle that, Dr. Ranelli or Megan?
Yeah, so I'll take a couple minutes to really explain where I am with this, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I know the banning of cell phones is getting a lot of steam across the country. If you read any Eastern Pennsylvania paper. New Jersey just signed a law that school districts have a bell-to-bell off and away. If you read the second paragraph, they have to get it to the Department of Ed, and then they have to get it to the school district, so it's not as easy as the headline reads, irregardless. We know it's gaining some steam. I actually have a meeting tomorrow with the two principals, Megan and Scott, regarding, of the high school, sorry, regarding how this procedure, AR, directive, whatever we call it, is working. So I guess the question I'll have for them tomorrow is, do we have a problem, right? Are our teachers complaining that cell phones are getting in the way? Is discipline higher because the use of cell phones during non-classroom times? Things like that. So we know it's gaining steam, but I also want to understand what kind of problem it would be solving, or what kind of problem we have before we try to solve a problem that doesn't exist. We have a lunch and learn structure that lends for kids to kind of go do their own thing, right? Are we saying that, one question I'll ask tomorrow is this, if we were to say students can't use it at all, bell to bell, are we saying kids can't listen to music at lunchtime, right? This hour that they have kind of to decompress and be alone, or not, maybe with friends, things like that. So there's a lot of variables and a lot of things the way Lower Merion structures their day at the high school. And again, K to 8, we have already taken care of that. It's bell to bell. We're not reported that there's a ton of problems. Some parents might say, well, I text my kid at school, he texts me back. Don't text your kid at school. I don't know how else to say that. I mean,
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, you're right. Don't text your kid while you know he's driving or she's driving. It's the same thing. Anyway, that's how I feel. So again, the biggest thing for me is, in any of all of this, what problem are we trying to solve? Are we creating an adult problem where we're saying it's a problem where we need to solve it for kids? Or is it a real problem that's getting in the way of education, discipline, kids' growth, things like that? So in saying that, we are educators. We'll bring issues to you that we want solved. So please know that we look at that stuff all the time. But we are well into understanding the steam that it's getting and trying to figure out what fits in Lower Merion, if that makes sense.
No, that's perfect. That's exactly, I think it's just looking at it and seeing whether or not anything needs to be adjusted from your view, from your standpoint. You guys are the administrators, and what you think is it working, and then bringing to us if you think that everything's working perfectly, if there should be adjustments, as was done before, I think 2 years ago when this whole directive took place.
Yeah.
So thank you.
We're
We
on it.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is it about the off and away? Because I kind of got sideswept that was even brought up to the committee, because it's not on the agenda, so we shouldn't have even brought it up.
And quite frankly, the things that we've talked about reorganizing these committees in the board meeting to be policy or whatever committee you're in, topics that are on the agenda, and then topics that are policy related that are off the agenda. And so we should make sure we're still remembering that we're in the policy meeting, not the random ask any question that you want meeting. We have times for those too. And I don't mean that in a flippant way, I mean it in an efficient way too. Do we have questions? So Abby, and then back to you, and I'll run your meeting.
It's okay, I'll take mine offline.
Okay. Thanks, Abby. Anything related to the agenda, and then if not, we'll go to other policy.
We have a more general question and then one related to off and away.
Okay, so both general questions.
Both general,
because
not agenda related.
Thank you. Okay, thanks.
Okay, so the first one is from Janice Ferguson of Ballackinwood. Which policy, I'm sorry, I think she had two parts, actually. Yeah, which policies are currently under review or flagged as ineffective, and how can the public track revisions and outcomes over time? How does the board assess whether existing policies are producing equitable outcomes across race, ability level, and socioeconomic status, and what happens when disparities persist? Then I read that one. Talia Nissim of Ardmore, I agree with Jason. I'd love to have a policy on off and away. Yair Lev of Marion Station, as Dr. Ranelli mentioned, momentum is growing rapidly, including state legislation in many school districts around us. to adopt and enforce a bell-to-bell ban on phones and personal devices during the school day with common sense exceptions. A few days ago, we met with leadership of the Radnor School District. They have implemented this in high school, and the results are astonishing. This is backed by strong research and real-world results showing better focus and learning, fewer distractions, stronger social connection, improved student well-being. We respectfully ask that you place this item on an upcoming agenda for formal discussion. Our request is a full policy bell-to-bell in K-12. Thank you for your service. And finally, Colleen Bertrand of Wynwood, revised policy 236 was finalized last June. Was the community Zoom meeting to discuss the changes already held? We were told that the process was to start current and end revised with a community presentation.
Are we gonna answer those? Sorry.
I think I got them all. It's getting late. The first about assessing policies and how do we identify policies to review. The administration, together with legal counsel, together with the board committee co-chairs, we talk about the process we will follow. Sometimes we do it because we need a legal update. That's like the AR 151 we did today. Sometimes it's because there's been a change of practice. Sometimes because there's an ineffective implementation or something that needs to be corrected. Where we are right now, and sometimes those things get identified as we go through the series and look at each policy one by one, and that does take time because there are a number of policies. So that's what we're attempting to do now, is to make sure that we have our eyes on all of the policies in an efficient and effective way as possible. And those types of questions are questions that we should be asking. Is it legally compliant? Is it doing what it should be doing? Are we finding that there are disparate outcomes, or et cetera? So those are all things that are embedded in the process of reviewing policies. And sometimes, like I said, there are one-offs that we pull for those specific reasons. Relative to policy 236, there was, and I don't want to misspeak here, but I believe there was a culminating meeting at the end of last year that described the revisions that were also outlined in the special education handbook, and that guidance we updated to reflect those revisions to policy 236. So there's a couple places where we intentionally reached out to translate what those details were in formats that are more designed for family consumption. So those are some examples, but I'm happy to follow up with Ms. Bertrand if she would like to reach out to me, just to make sure we have she has the right information.
Yeah, can you follow up with her either way and just check with Kimberly? I don't know if that community there was supposed to be one at the start of the year too. Yeah.
Okay, I'll confirm.
And
yep, I'll follow up.
Yeah, and 236, just for everyone's clarification, is the restraint policy that we worked with the Committee of Special Education and Administration on last year. There was.
Behavioral supports.
Yeah.
Positive behaviors.
Positive behavioral supports.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And there's one more comment that came in from Girish Ramaswamy, and my apologies if I'm mispronouncing that, of Ballackinwood. As a parent, I truly appreciate what was shared here on taking a constructive approach to first figure out if there is a problem with cell phones, and if there is, figure out how to solve it. We as parents would love to have a dialogue and transparency with the board. Every state that has implemented has reported success measured by improved student attention to educators sharing their lives have been made easier. Growing evidence from academics support it too.
I'm sorry, Megan, that first question about how you review it, and I apologize if my brain's not tracking perfectly on this, did you talk about how we evaluate the policy too, to be effective? Sorry if I missed that.
In terms of implementation?
So there was two parts to that question, like how do you know which ones to go over and what's the process? Mm-hmm. But then I'm pretty sure the second part of that question was, how do you evaluate for its effectiveness or its suppression of a group because the policy is actually negatively affecting people? I think that was the second part.
Yeah, and I think that, think it's hard to answer that in one sentence because each policy has different tentacles to it and different expectations. Some are legal compliance. Are we legally compliant with this requirement? Others are more aspirational, and therefore the regulation might spell out what those expectations should look like. And so that accountability factor is where, I mean, an opportunity to review that is when we come back to policy and ask those questions. Is it an effective policy? That's always something that we should be thinking about in the back of our minds. And then as far as like the, effectiveness of, we've established a start time. That was, we have a student survey. We're evaluating like how that's impacting grades and attendance and things like that. So like I said, there's variables that would be relevant to the policy depending on the policy. So the idea though is when we do set a policy, we try to design it in a way that reflects how we're going to measure it.
I think that's perfect. Thank you for answering that. And it goes perfectly back to what you shared, that first you're going to investigate what's the goal and what's the problem we're solving for, and are we measuring the right problem? So therefore, if a policy does come down the road through state action or our own, then we'll be able to go back and say, this is what we're solving for, and this is how we're going to measure to get off the policy. Sorry, it was just a perfect circular, so I wanted to make sure we hit it.
Amy, any other comments? Okay, so we will be moving forward for adoption, policy 002, policy 004, and policy 007. We're going to revise and come back to 006, and then we're also moving forward the administrative regulation for 1511R with those minor changes. And then we will get working on policy 217, high school graduation requirements, do some investigating on commercial advertising to decide whether we prioritize, and then future discussion on 134 and 215, as well as the 100 series. And Dr. Ranelli currently is working to think about cell phone use in our district and the implications and proposed next steps. Our next meeting is February 9th, and we'll see you then. Thank you.